Hello, this is Exploring the Emerging Trends in Cannabis Products, and I have Michael Fruling here with me. Michael, could you go ahead and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what this theme is?
Sure. The Just about myself briefly. I'm the founder and CEO of BFS Innovations, which is a open innovation consultancy. We deal with problem solving primarily in the technology scouting arena for major consumer products companies. And we're focusing this evening's discussion on the cannabis board, which I think that is a fascinating discussion for any company, frankly, in the consumer packaged goods industry. So there's a fundamental question, which is what businesses should be participating in this new economy, and should those businesses include conventional, well-established, well-known, big-name brands that might be having some reservations about associating their reputations with something that has long carried the stigma of being, of course, illegal and perhaps a little disreputable. I thought that in organizing the panel and developing a advisor list in partnership with Convetted, we wanted to bring in folks who were both experienced from a marketing and also from a regulatory standpoint on the kind of the large corporate side. So folks who might be on the outside looking in from a corporate perspective, who might wish to get into the industry, but might not be there just yet. And then other folks who were more intimately involved, whether it's they've got financial interest in cannabis businesses and or maybe they're actually running cannabis businesses from these legalized states as we speak. I think that, in the past theme discussion, I was highlighting a few folks, in particular folks who are very strong on the marketing and on the regulatory side. And I think that continues here with a few individuals that I wish to call out. One being Brendan Rue, who is a sales and marketing manager for a company that is already operating in the field. They're dealing with this, he's dealing with dispensaries on a daily basis, and so he has a real insider's perspective on the emerging marketplace. Jim Kelly, I wish to call out because he's another one like McKellar Griggs, is outside looking in. But Jim has a very strong OTC background, and he knows what it takes in order to go from RX to OTC and how do you kind of do those switch outs. So his perspective is very helpful. And Lynn Power, who is a advertising and marketing senior executive, she's looking at the marketing challenges from the marketer's perspective. What kind of things would I want to be able to say about these products? What kind of things would I want to be able to communicate in order to attract customers to use my particular brand? So I think that these are all voices that need to be heard, and we're glad to have them as part of our panel. As we move into theme 2, we wanted to move the focus a little bit tighter and say, okay, recognizing that we have two different areas of interest, medical and recreational, who is exhibiting or practicing best practices in terms of being able to represent their product with technical support for the claims that they make and are approaching the businesses respectively in the most professional manner. So that tends to be the kind of overriding focus of this particular theme. I think it's pretty safe to say that the medical arena is leading the charge in terms of kind of setting the standard for how well technically supported approaches to cannabis-derived products should be handled. But at the same time, the FDA has not yet weighed in on which new drug applications it's willing to accept for particular conditions. So other than having a legal material that's being dispensed, within these dispensaries, you don't have a whole lot of guidance as yet it's emerging. It's going to be emerging fairly shortly, but you don't have a whole lot of guidance in terms of, what the script is for each particular condition that these quote unquote drugs are being dispensed for. There's a lot of activity going on in terms of clinical studies in anticipation of being able to make these FDA submissions, but it's still very early going. And it's still, very difficult to tell how the FDA is going to weigh in, particularly in the somewhat uncertain political environment in which we operate today. If you look at it from the two different endpoints, medical is probably the place that any kind of big company relationship in this arena is probably going to be spawned from the medical side. I'd be very surprised if, let's say, a Mondelez decided to come out with a cannabis-infused Oreo cookie. It would seem to me to be a pretty high reputational risk for a company well-established like that. So I don't think that the inroads in this field are going to, for big companies, are going to come from the recreational side. I think they're more likely to come from the medical side. And that's going to ultimately manifest itself as some type of an OTC business, but that's probably years away. Recreational is pretty much operating on its own. And as I mentioned a little earlier, to varying degrees in terms of how responsibly and or how professionally they choose to, present their product. The thing that I think some of our advisors have pointed out is while the U.S. is sort of making up its rules as it's going along here, there may be some opportunities to learn some lessons from what is already being done in Canada, where cannabis is legalized, and also in the UK, where my understanding is it's been legalized for a number of years. So I think that folks are trying to take some pages from their playbooks in terms of how they might want to function, in terms of establishing a toehold in the United States. Recreational products. The interesting thing, I think, and I think others would probably share this, is while there's dosages being shared in the context of recreational products, that certainly isn't front and center. And frankly, I don't know how well it's being policed. So the customer doesn't necessarily currently know what they're buying in terms of dosages and in terms of purity of the material that they're consuming, whereas in the medical arena, that is being watched more closely.
And it looks like there's some concern with terms like farm to table or...
It's an interesting point because it sounds like some of the marketers in the recreational arena are looking to kind of parlay things that they've seen in the food and beverage categories in the mainstream, where you're hearing more about this so-called, natural, clean labels, farm to table type of language. And apparently, according to some of our experts, there may be some consequences associated with making those types of claims. From a marketing standpoint, there may be some regulatory oversight that is going to kind of impinge on their ability to kind of freely make those types of statements. If you think about it for any period of time, it shouldn't be terribly surprising that folks are getting themselves kind of staged in Canada in anticipation for what they might be able to accomplish in the United States. I don't know that it necessarily is being articulated within those companies as that they're looking at Canada as a testing ground, but I wouldn't be surprised if they are. And some big name companies like Sandoz, Novartis, they're getting ready to play in the U.S. market. And it's kind of intriguing, and it's not surprising if you're taking kind of the ethical approach where, you've got let's say an FDA approved medication, and let's say you've got technical clinical data that supports it. So it's almost like any other new drug, assuming that they're able to go down that path and take that new drug path. We should expect big healthcare companies to be playing in this space.
So, Michael, you're really becoming a fast thought leader on this topic. If people wanted to reach out and get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Well, there are two easy ways of doing it. One is by email. which is Michael, Michael, at bfsinnovations.com, or they can call me at 614-937-2408.
Great. Well, thank you, Michael. I really appreciate you being here and taking us through this theme.
Oh, my pleasure, Eric. It's great speaking with you.